Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Apples and Ginos Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the podcast you come to when you're finally ready to take fantasy hockey seriously. My name is Nibbelink. I'm the creator of Apples and Ginos, originator of the Zero G Draft Strategy. And in this podcast, I'm going to break down the most puzzling players league-wide as determined by the Apples and Ginos Discord server. Let's get it. Welcome in, everyone. Another edition of Puzzling Players coming at you. It is a great Monday for fantasy hockey. Great day for hockey in general. I guess maybe unless your name is Dougie Hamilton. Mr. Hunter's in here. Let's go. I share that sentiment. Let's go. If you're here, liking the stream would go a long way towards showing your appreciation. Appreciate all of you taking time out of your Monday to join me here. Hopefully your teams are out to a hot start already. Roman is asking for some crossing of the streams. You know we like to do that here. So let's dig in with the most requested player as submitted by the Apples and Ginos Discord server this week. It is Dougie Hamilton. Now, Dougie Hamilton obviously gets scratched on Sunday. Blake and I did talk about this decent amount there in the flagship show, so if you haven't caught that yet, you should definitely go back and check that one out. I tend to think that this is pretty much just a play from the Devils to try to get Dougie Hamilton to waive his no-trade team list, or at least to open it up to some more potential trade partners for the Devils. I'm not a fan of that tactic by the team. I think Dougie Hamilton, by just about any metric other than raw points scored, has been one of the better Devils defensemen this year and deserves better, but such is life in the NHL, I guess, and Tom Fitzgerald is pretty clearly got his name on the hot seat with just about everybody around the Devils right now, so I don't know that he will stop at one single scratch in order to try to get Dougie Hamilton to move. That being said, he's got to get the coach's approval there too, and I guess Sheldon Keefe was okay with it, so that's happening currently. Dougie Hamilton did draw back in for this game that's currently ongoing as I'm recording right now. And I think the Devils did get a goal, but I didn't see. I'd be a little surprised if he suddenly came back in and put some points up, but that would be pretty awesome, to be quite honest with you. I would be pretty happy to see that. If Dougie Hamilton just came back after being scratched and put up 5 points and made it so that they could never scratch him again, that'd be pretty hilarious, but nothing so far for him. The goal was Dawson Mercer from Nico Hischier. Hischier is on the list as well. I guess before I move on from Hamilton, I'll just say, the underlying stuff is all still there for Hamilton. It doesn't look like he's forgotten how to play hockey or anything. I think the best case scenario is that he gets moved at this point in time for just about everybody involved. So I kind of am hoping for that situation. Apparently he vetoed a trade to the Sharks. That would be amazing for fantasy purposes, I think. He'd be awesome there, I have no doubt. Whether or not that happens is definitely up for debate at this point, but it would be pretty fun to see. So overall, I think Dougie Hamilton, the player, is still terrific. I think there's pretty much no chance that he's usable for fantasy in the short term. But if you do have Dougie Hamilton, you may want to just hang on to him for another week or two here just to see what does happen. I feel like a team trading for Dougie Hamilton, they're taking on a big chunk of salary, so they are going to feature him. I think he will most likely be a power play one quarterback wherever he goes. So yeah, I think there's a pretty good chance that Dougie is pretty valuable rest of season for fantasy. But if you're scrapping for wins this week and you need to take a dub this week to make the playoffs and you feel pretty confident that Dougie's not going to do much for you, then I can definitely see why some people are dropping him in some leagues. Nico Hischier next up, 2 goals in the last 5, does have an assist on the goal scored so far. They're still in the first period against Minnesota as I'm recording here. 22 minutes a night, 38th shots per 60, 21st individual expected goals for per 60, 39th on ice expected goals for per 60 over the last 5. His underlying numbers right now are actually some of the best that he's had all year. They did change up the line, so he is on this line with Mercer now instead of being with Hughes and Jesper Bratt. And I think he can still produce there. He's still going to be on top power play, but he will kind of need that power play more than he did previously to get some of his points, although he obviously didn't to get this assist here. So I like the underlying stuff. I want to see him drive his own line. It does feel like he has not been the best version of himself at any point really this year. So I'm still waiting to see that from Nico Hischier, but I mean, I don't know what people are doing with Nico Hischier. Unless you're in like an 8-team league, you're not dropping Nico Hischier in my estimation. He's still on a 60-point pace, even with how bad it's been. And you have to expect that it will get a little bit better than this, not just for him, but for the team in general. We also have Timo Meier and Jesper Bratt on the list here, so we may as well just jump down there and talk about them and talk about the Devils as a whole. Timo Meier has just a goal in his last 5, 17.5 minutes average time on ice. Still way up there, 4th in shots per 60, 23rd individual expected goals for per 60, 87th in on ice expected goals for per 60. Now in this game, he's on the top line with Jack Hughes. And so maybe we get even more out of Timo Meier in terms of the chances, at least. He's just got to put him in the back of the net now. And I think there's a pretty good chance he does that if he sticks there for any length of time. Jesper Bratt, 3 points in his last 5, over 20 minutes average time on ice, 125 shots per 60, 123 individual expected goals for per 60, up at 29th in on ice expected goals for per 60. Bratt is on a 16-goal, 62-point pace on the season. Really disappointing year for him for sure. I think that things get better here again, but again, it's a spot where the Devils are really scuffling right now. There's probably some pretty bad vibes in that locker room right now. It wouldn't be too surprising if that were going on. If there's a little bit of finger pointing going on, even among the players, that wouldn't be shocking at this point because of how badly things have turned and how quickly things have turned. So yeah, there could be human elements to a lot of this, and the on-ice stuff that we look at might not end up in the results that we think we should get based on them. Yeah. I think in the end, though, like I do still view Jesper Bratt as a buy low here. I do believe in the resurgence. I think Jack Hughes should only gain strength as he works his way back from the injury. I just have confidence that, we've seen multiple seasons of Jesper Bratt being very, very good, and this is the outlier season. I have a lot of confidence that at some point here he's going to go on a run and get his mojo back. All right, Rasmus Dahlin, another player that Blake and I talked about in the flagship show yesterday, so another one you can get a more detailed take on there. But basically, the underlying stats here are still pretty terrific. I honestly feel pretty confident that Dahlin is going to pop off for a bunch of points in the near future, and we're all going to forget that this ever happened. He doesn't have any points on the 2 goals that Buffalo scored so far against Florida through 2 periods, but the underlying stats are all there. 27th on ice expected goals for per 60, 14th individual expected goals for per 60 in the last 5 games, 3rd in individual expected goals for per 60 on the season, 8th in on ice. 3.8% shooting percentage is the big number here that's really holding down his value. Only 4 goals on the season. This is a guy who should be shooting easily double that and more on pace for like an 18 or a 16 goal season. And if he was doing that, then I think no one would be remarking on this current stretch of play where he's just got the 1 assist in the last 5 games. So I have all the faith in the world in Rasmus Dahlin. If somebody is willing to move off of Dahlin because of this recent cold stretch, because he's not on a 70-point pace currently, he's only on a 61-point pace, then absolutely I would go and make that deal. Ryan Leonard next up here, 2 goals, 6 points in his last 5, almost 18 minutes a night. He's been getting that top power play treatment, which has been pretty exciting to see. He's been there for a minute now and getting a pretty good run on that top unit. So that's something that we should watch for, see if it continues. It'll be interesting to see. I didn't see an update today on Justin Sordiff, who left the game yesterday after taking a puck to the face. Sordiff, Leonard, and McMichael was a line that was going together for a bit there, and obviously that was hot at the time, and we'll see what actually shakes out. But I have a lot of faith in Ryan Leonard, the prospect. I don't know that it'll continue. He might be a little up and down. This is, for all intents and purposes, his rookie season. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Rookies tend to be up and down throughout the course of their season. But Ryan Leonard, as a prospect, as a player in general, like where he'll be in 5 years, I have a ton of confidence that this is going to be yeah, maybe like a baby Tom Wilson type player, a 65 to 70 point top line capable winger. And so I'm just going to be in on those profiles of guys more often than not because the highs can be so much higher than just the average run of the mill player. Like even guys like Sordif and McMichael, I just don't think have the ceiling that Ryan Leonard does, even in Leonard's rookie season here. So that's why I'm just kind of always going to go back to a guy like Ryan Leonard. You don't have to hang on to Leonard. If it doesn't make sense for your team, I'm not saying you have to hang on to Ryan Leonard. It's just a guy that I want to highlight, especially for deeper leagues, that you may want to consider holding him even when it wouldn't be necessarily the most optimal thing for your lineup, depending obviously on all the other factors that go into making these kind of decisions. But the Capitals, again, play 4 games next week. Next week is a really weird week schedule-wise, so you're going to want to check that out for yourself and see if he's going to factor into your starting lineup plans much over the next this week and next week. But yeah, something to keep in mind for sure. Next week, it's all over the place. There's 10 games on the Monday, there's 8 games on the Tuesday, 6 on the Wednesday, 8 on the Thursday, 8 on the Friday, 9 on the Saturday, 6 on the Sunday. So it is really spread out. So basically any team that plays 4 games probably going to get all 4 games from that player. And Washington does have 4 games next week. So pretty good chance you're going to get Leonard back into your lineup next week, even if you're not getting every single game from him this week. So in deeper formats, for sure, I'm trying to hang on to Ryan Leonard in, more standard 12 teams. It's definitely more of a bubble player if you're looking at like a 10-team league or below, shallower type 12-team league, then he's probably on the outside looking in for this week, but I'd be willing to add him right back for next week. Let's go over to Anaheim. Cutter Gauthier, Leo Carlson. I left a spot here. Lucas Dostal was also requested again. Yeah, Gauthier and Dostal both just a couple points in their last 5 games. Gauthier's minutes have been really down, 15 and a half minutes average time on ice. Carlson's minutes were on the rise, but then I saw a tweet and I retweeted it about him missing in practice today. I'm going to read this verbatim so I don't perjure myself here on the podcast. Where'd this tweet go? Leo Carlson did not return to practice. No update today. We'll see what's new at morning skate tomorrow, courtesy of Zach Kavanaugh there today. So it sounds like something that happened in practice. And yeah, it feels like this could have been a scenario where he was kind of dealing with something and was, not the best version of himself. I tend, again, I think this is a player with a ton of upside, and so I'm very hesitant to let players like that go, or, even try to sell them low or something like that. And it did kind of feel like in that last game with the goal and the assist, he had 5 shots, played 20 minutes, like the good things were starting to cycle back into his game, and maybe he was just feeling a little better after working back from that injury. It's a 1-game sample size. I'm trying not to read too much into it. We'll have to see what comes tomorrow. I'm not willing to drop Carlson in just about any format just yet, just because we saw how high the highs can be. I do think Anaheim rights the ship there in some sense, maybe not to their former glory of the early part of this year. But yeah, I do think that Carlson in particular, I think he can be a lot better than he has been the last little bit. Gauthier is a tougher case just because of the average time on ice is so much down. I said it on the pod yesterday. I think that Joel Quenneville is actually hurting himself here by spreading these minutes out. It's pretty clear to, I feel like, just about everybody who the really top-end, talented, play-driving players are on this team. Carlson and Gauthier being a couple of them. Troy Terry missing last week definitely didn't help the Ducks' case either. I just think like he's got to start leaning on them at some point. What he's doing right now, just mixing and matching lines every single game, back to the blender, it's not working. Get back to it. Let people develop some chemistry. play the really top end guys, the guys who can win you a night, play them, 18 plus minutes and let them get to biz. But that's me, and that may not be Quenville. I just tend to think that the longer this goes poorly, the more he's going to have to default to playing some of the better players on this team more often. And Goche, while the recent stats aren't terrific under the hood, he's still third in shot attempts per 60 over the last 5 games. So he's still attempting shots. It's just, yeah, a situation where the time on ice has gone down. I do expect that'll come around again. And I do think Cutter Goche will come back to much more of this. Like, he's still on a 36 goal, 73 point pace. I think he can hit that on the year still. Lucas Dostal was requested. Anaheim's defense is still pretty bad. There was a stretch where they were starting to look okay, and I thought that maybe, they were starting to do a little better. Then they got a little dinged up on the back end again. Defense, not a team priority, it seems, at this time. And they went south again. They played some teams that did beat up on them a little bit too. So that's going to happen. All that means for Lucas Dostal in my mind is he's going to have to make a lot of saves. We did kind of see this from Dostal last year too, where he did kind of fade a bit in maybe like the third quarter of the season. And so that might just be the same kind of part of the season for him for whatever reason. I tend to think that it'll right the ship here, but you know me and goalies, if he's not getting it done for you in your league, I don't think you have to hang on to Lucas Dostal just because he's a name brand player or he was really good for you earlier in the year. Those are not things that I think you have to do for yourself. So if you need to drop Lucas Dostal, you absolutely have permission. All right. I'm going to get back to the comments here. We got lots of comments. That's good stuff. Good evening from the Breadman. When all healthy, how do you rank Decord, Jari, Askarov? That's really going to... points league, that rewards volume. I was going to say that it really depends on what your system is. So for volume, I think Jari is actually probably the guy who's going to get the most volume when he returns from injury. Unless Connor Ingram really goes on a run here or something. I think we know what Calvin Pickard is. And so, yeah, I think assuming that Jari comes back at full strength from this injury, I think he's the most likely to get the most volume on the best team. So I think Jari, then, I mean, if he can handle the the beatings that he's going to take every once in a while, then Askarov will get more volume, I think, than Decord rest away, as long as Grubauer continues to play pretty well. And then it would be Decord last, just because the volume I don't think is there currently. And that's where I'm at. Like, I'm evaluating where these guys are at currently and not trying to prognosticate too much in the future because goalie performance can be so up and down. So that's where I'm at. If you do need a little bit of rate stats, then Decord will probably have a little bit better rate stats than Askarov, at least in the short term. AstroJam says, thanks for these streams, videos. Appreciate you. Happy New Year's from Roman. Best fantasy hockey content. Appreciate that as well. Nate, if the moon was made of cheese, would you eat it? Are we in this scenario? Does the moon still perform the same functions for basically keeping a life on Earth functioning as it currently does? Because if so, then I don't think morally I could eat the cheese that the moon was made of. Redman, I'm ready to take fantasy hockey seriously. Nice. All healthy, Landeskog or Leonard rest of season. I would take Landeskog there pretty conclusively. Brat, just traded Binner and Zegras for Brat. Did I win? I don't think you can call a win at this point in the season for sure, but I don't mind the trade. You're obviously banking on a bit of regression for Zegras and some positive regression for Brat. I think both of those things are likely to happen. That doesn't mean they will happen, but I think they're both likely to happen. So I think, Binner to me is a nobody. Like, he's been truly awful this year, so I think that's addition by subtraction there. And then it's really just Zegras versus Brat. I think they're comparable rest of season, but I think I would still take Brat heads up. But yeah, definitely an interesting comparison. Hashtag Zergy from Dynasty Dave. Appreciate you being here. Rear Admiral Meow Meow is back. Ahoy, Nate. I traded Velarde for Will Smith. Thoughts on the 2 for the rest of the season. We're in one of those crazy leagues, plays right up until the end of the NHL season. San Jose schedule is elite the last 2 weeks. That is true. Not great the previous week, but if you're in the last 2 weeks there, it is pretty good. Yeah, assuming in this case that you're sitting pretty for playoffs and you're expecting to be there when it's all said and done, then I like that. It will be interesting if Will Smith goes straight back to the top line. William Eklund, as we've mentioned, has found some really good chemistry with Celebrini on that top line. So is Chernyshov. Do they keep that together? Does Smith go play on the second line with Toffoli? Obviously, we want Smith just to be on Celebrini's line on top power play, but that may not happen, at least to start. So that would be the only caveat there, but I think they're comparable players when both are running at 100%. Hi, Nate. What are we doing with Norris getting donuts today? Yeah, Norris is on the list to discuss here. I think it is a salient conversation for a number of reasons. Really, the biggest concern that the people had was the lack of hits. Josh Norris historically was a huge guy for hits, and he's not doing that anymore. Just 5 hits, 10 blocks on the season. He's played in 17 games, and as you mentioned, donuts through 2 periods against Florida so far. And the big thing that's different as of late is that he hasn't been playing with Tage Thompson. Tage Thompson has been playing with Peyton Krebs and Josh Doan. And Josh Norris is still on the top power play, so he's still getting that. He is still playing with Alex Tuch and Jason Zucker, which is a fine line in its own right, but obviously you want that Tage Thompson exposure as much as possible. Does have 4 points in his last 5 games, but under 15 minutes average time on ice. The underlyings are fine, but not great. He's not shooting nearly as much either. So yeah, I'm nervous about Josh Norris. Yeah, he does have 4 points in his last 4 games prior to this game here currently, so maybe give him a little bit of slack for that. But it's a player that is trending towards the back end of the rosters that have him on for sure. So I don't think this is a player that you're going to have to hang on to. He does have great potential, but if it continues to trend down, especially in terms of the ice time, I think that he's trending towards, in and out of your lineup depending on streaming. Bakora, hey Nate, what's your strategy when streaming in Bangers Cats at the start of the week? How do you decide on streaming points versus peripheral cats, analyzing you and your opponent's strengths and weaknesses? Yeah, so I do this pretty much every week. I take a look at who my opponent is. I take a look at, actually I'll just put it on the screen. So this is my Bangers Cats League. You can go back and watch the draft video for this if you want to, where I got roundly excoriated by the YouTube faithful for how I drafted. Seems to be working out for me so far. First in the league so far. But I do go to this team stats page in Yahoo. You can see the win-loss totals, the win-loss rankings, so like which categories you've won the most often over the course of the season. But you can also see the totals. So you can see the actual raw totals of where you stand in terms of goals, assists, points, all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, I will take a look, especially at those peripheral categories because they are the easiest to stream. So last week, for example, I was against I think it was this Rocky Rocks, right? I know I'm second guessing myself. I'm going to have to go back in my matchup and make sure I'm not saying something incorrect. Yeah, Rocky Rocks is who I was against last week. So basically at the beginning of last week when I was evaluating what moves I was going to make for the week, I went and looked at what he had. I saw that he has a ton of face-off wins on the season where I've only been targeting face-offs in weeks where I'm against some of these other low face-off teams. So in weeks where I'm against this Corners Are for Stamps, this Magic Mike, for example, even these guys who are a little bit ahead of me in terms of the face-off wins, then I will target face-off wins because I think it's a really easy category to stream and win for the week if you're conscientious about it. So I do it in those scenarios, but when I'm against a guy who's obviously hugely targeting face-off wins, then I'll punt the category and I'll focus on some other stuff. So for this past week, I saw that he was actually pretty far ahead of me in hits as well. So I focused on blocks. I picked up a couple of Washington Capitals, Ferrari and Sandin, I think it was, and basically just went ahead and focused on that. So I won blocks last week. As a result, I handily won all the point scoring categories, basically. Won goalie categories as well, so ended up pretty good last week. But that is what I'll do in Bangers Cats, is I'll take a look at these totals, especially on the season, and see where I rank and see what I should devote my streaming energy towards. And that's been pretty effective. I don't use all my ads at the beginning of the week. I do want to remain flexible throughout the week, same as I would in a points league, but I do target those with especially like the week-long streams, right? So yeah, fun note there. Always a great thing when half the list is players you own. Yeah, that's always fun. With both Kachuk and Jari off IR, I'll have to drop one of Michkov, Verhaeghe, Nikishin, Norris, ESPN standard lock for playoff spot, but fighting for a bye with 5 teams. What would you suggest? So in ESPN standard, you're getting huge weight on blocks there, so that helps Nikishin for sure. Michkov is not doing a whole lot for you. Norris would probably be the second there. Verhaeghe, I think, has a couple points in this Sabres game. A couple of assists for Verhaeghe, is on the top power play again currently. You might want to take a quick look at where Kachuk is lining up and if that's bumping Verhaeghe down the lineup. Yeah. I think probably I would rank it Michkov drop first, then Norris, then Nikishin, then Verhaeghe currently, but that's about where I'm at. All right. Could you take a look at Slavkovsky? He's been great the last few weeks. Curious how real the production is. We can absolutely add Slavkovsky to the list here for a moment. He's got 5 points in the last 5, 18.5 minutes average time on ice, top power play, second line there with Demidov and Kapanen. 224 shots per 60, 260 individual expected goals for per 60, 183 on ice expected goals for per 60. Nice stuff in terms of the point scoring, but the underlyings are kind of mid to below average, I would say. 64-point pace on the season. He's gotten there more so on efficiency. The IPP is on the lower side, but he is kind of that brand of player. You do typically see lower IPPs on net front, or, these bigger dudes who go to the net and wait for guys like Demidov to make the plays around them. Typically end up with less of an IPP in those scenarios. Yeah, I think it's a hot stretch for Slavkovsky. I'm not convinced that he's just arrived and is going to be this tremendous for the rest of the year. I think he would have to improve some underlying numbers rest of season for that to really come home to roost. That being said, he's in a place to be efficient. So I think a good chunk of this efficiency is probably sustainable, just maybe not to the tune of an 18% shooting percentage and a 15.3% on ice shooting percentage. Those are both very high numbers. So in terms of the 29-goal, 64-point pace that he's currently on, I think that could be a touch hot unless the underlyings improve. They very well could, Demidov improving over the course of the season. However that goes, I could definitely see a scenario. He does have another goal in the game here today with an assist by Demidov, so good stuff for him there. I think somewhere in this 60-point range is probably where I'd put him, but I do think there's potential for some regression here as well, if that makes sense. Thoughts on Raquel? We do have Raquel on the list, so we will be getting there. Elias Pettersson or Leo Carlsson? Interesting comparison, I guess, between the two. Elias Pettersson, 4th in on ice expected goals for per 60 over the last 5 games. Pretty interesting stuff. Good stuff there. I think it's kind of a ceiling versus floor scenario again. Leo Carlsson, I think, has a much higher ceiling there in Anaheim than Pettersson does in Vancouver, but I think Pettersson probably has a safer floor, better peripherals, he's going to block a lot, etc. So, yeah, I think that's a ceiling versus floor scenario, and you kind of have to evaluate what's better for you and your lineup at the moment. Trade Barzal for Leo. I think I would probably still do that. Yeah, I think at worst that's probably a wash, and I'd still think that Leo has higher upside. I don't think you have to, but I think if you made me choose between the two players rest of the season, I'd still take Leo. Love you, Nate. Thanks for making Monday special. Thank you for making my Monday special by being here. Pecora, do you see the Leafs net being 50-50 split when Stolarz comes back? Yeah. Yeah, I'd be pretty surprised if it was anything but. Brady McLaren says trade B. Kachuk, Y. Johnson, and Radish for McDavid. 14-man points league, ESPN regular points league. Doesn't include hits or blocks very much. It's a high price to pay, especially in 14-man. I mean, if it's not a high activity league and there's a lot of good players on the waiver wire that you can use to replace Wyatt Johnson and Radish, then I definitely consider it because obviously McDavid is McDavid. We are giving up a lot here. I think I would do it still, but it does give me pause just because of the size of the league. So yeah, I think if you're confident about your ability to get replacement players off the waiver wire that you will be able to hold rest of the season, then that would make me feel better about pulling the trigger. But it's really hard to say no to picking up McDavid, that's for sure. Is Theo Meyer a drop at this point? We did talk about Meyer, so hopefully you caught that. Otherwise, you can just go back a few minutes in this episode. Do we think Radish holds on to power play 1 when Hedman comes back at this point? They definitely should with how much he's producing. Yeah, that's my base assumption at this point. Could be wrong, but yeah, with how well it's going, I just don't see why they would rush Hedman back from injury straight on to power play 1 when they really don't need to. With a chance, hey Nate, just joined. Thoughts on bonus in Columbus? Any need to sell high on the likes of Marchenko? Yeah, so we last saw Rick Bonus, obviously, over in Winnipeg. So it was a tough go for everybody. I'm specifically thinking of Nikolai Ehlers under Rick Bonus, right? We talked a lot about Nikolai Ehlers under Rick Bonus. Now we're talking about Nikolai Ehlers under Rod Brind'Amour. It's a whole nother thing. But I am worried that Rick Bonus will kind of limit some minutes on some of their top guys. Or not even top guys, but he won't give some people a chance. Like he won't give the Kent Johnson a chance. That being said, like it's not like Evison was giving Kent Johnson a chance this year either, so it's not exactly a change in pace there. I think that Bonus will try to clean up the defensive side of things, and so yeah, it could put the clamps on some offense. He could, in a worst case scenario, you could try to put the clamps on Werenski. I think Werenski, he's by a lot of people's counts at least a top 5 defenseman in the league, maybe a top 3 defenseman in the league. And so I think he has, enough gravity of his own that Bonus will kind of let Werenski be Werenski and be, the kind of player that he is and not try to limit him too much. So I think maybe the elite guys there are safe, but I am worried about what it means for, a guy like Fantilli. Bonus might lean on veterans. He might kind of go old school with it there, and that's something that I would be a little bit worried about. I don't know that it's like a rush out and sell high because I don't think you're selling really high on anybody in Columbus. Like none of them have really been popping off to the extent that you're going to get some huge value back. Maybe you want to sell on Werenski just in the chance that Bonus really does implement a strong defense first system and they start, getting into more 2-1 games. That's a possibility. It's not something I'm discounting. Yeah, I'm not ecstatic about the hire for fantasy purposes by any stretch, but I don't know that it's going to be much worse than it was, honestly, for fantasy there in Columbus. So, yeah. Aiden Hill will likely be number 1 when he's back, if nothing lingering from the injury. I would have to assume so. Vegas has really struggled to figure out what to do in the net. So I think that if and when Aiden Hill is good to go, he will absolutely get the lion's share of work. All right. Back to the list, Adam Fantilli, we were just talking about 3 assists in his last 5, just over 18 minutes average time on ice, 183rd shots per 60, 159 individual expected goals for per 60, 15th in on ice expected goals for per 60, though. A good stat there. In the last game, he was skating on a line with Marchenko and Sillinger. Was on the top power play with Ken Johnson, Kirill Marchenko, and Charlie Coyle. Coyle there to take the face off and be a net front guy. I still like Fantilli a lot. I think he's maybe a bit more flash than finish, at least to this point in his career. And so that part is a little concerning. And obviously now we have the variable of Rick Bonus, which could be a positive factor. Sometimes coaches come in and, they have the right buttons to press with a young player. That's absolutely a possibility. But Bonus has typically favored a pretty lockdown defensive style, and it would be a little bit shocking if he just kind of lets them run wild out there. So yeah, I think that's something to monitor for sure. It could just be a scenario too where they really even out a lot of the time on ice. That being said, Columbus could sell off some of their non-key players like the Boone Jenners, like the Charlie Coyles. You've heard talk of people hunting around those guys in trade markets. So if they start to sell off, then that could mean even more minutes for the guys remaining. So you can see it a bunch of ways. I think Fantilli is a terrifically talented player. I think the conversion should come to a greater extent. With the bonus variable now, it's just increasing the error bands on any projection you can make. So the 22 goal, 51 point pace that he's on currently, I think that's a baseline. I don't think it's going to get worse than that, but I'm not as convinced as I was even a week ago that it's going to get better from here on out. Andrei Svechnikov, 5 points in his last 17 minutes average time on ice, 77th shots per 60, 39th individual expected goals for per 60, and 12th in on ice expected goals for per 60. Svechnikov in the last game in this game, that's still going on against Detroit, is on that top line with Aho and Ehlers, is on the top power play. So this is almost shockingly turning out to be one of the seasons, at least so far. I mean, there's a lot of season left, but we've obviously been decrying RBA's usage of Svechnikov for many years. At this point, he's probably gotten just about as much power play one time this year as he has in any year prior. He's on a 22 goal, 64 point pace. His underlyings look terrific. First in the league in on ice Corsi for per 60. And the conversion is still pretty down. So theoretically, you could see even more from Svechnikov if this deployment continues. It's just, will the deployment continue? And I don't know how to answer that for you other than to say it probably won't because it's Rod Brind'Amour. So do I think that Svechnikov can be a 64-point player rest of season? Yes, I absolutely do. Do I think he has ceiling for more than that? Yes, I absolutely do. Do I think he hits that ceiling under Rod Brind'Amour? I absolutely cannot and will not project that. So that's where I'm at on Svechnikov. Brandt Clark, 3 assists in his last 19 minutes average time on ice, 10th in shots per 60, 49th individual expected goals for per 60, 10th in on ice expected goals for per 60. On the season, 9 goal, 39 point pace, 11th in shots per 60 on the season, 23rd individual expected goals for per 60, 36th in on ice expected goals for per 60. Brandt Clark is a difference-making defenseman, and Jim Hiller is the only person in the NHL who doesn't realize that. He is finally getting what appears to be top power play time now. I'm still waiting on him not being saddled by Joel Edmondson as his defense partner. I'm still waiting on him to skate the 22 minutes that he deserves. He is quite literally exactly what the Kings need to, inject some life into this team that's just under a constant malaise, it feels like. Anyway, I digress. Love Brandt Clark. This is a player who, when the system changes, and I do believe it will because I do believe Jim Hiller is going to coach himself out of a job here at some point. If and when it changes, I do think Brandt Clark is going to be a very, very legit fantasy option. Just, is that going to change this season? Probably not. Even without that, if he is going to get power play 1, he's still going to be rosterable, definitely at least as a 4th fantasy defenseman with upside for more. So it's definitely a spot where I want Brandt Clark on my teams while it's in this current position, with the potential that it gets better through Jim Hiller firing. And yeah, I think that's the best we can hope for Brandt Clark at the moment. Will Cooley, next up, 0 points in his last 5 games. Probably goes back further than that, if we're being honest. I'd have to double check on the player, but either way, it's just not a player that I'm excited about and haven't been for quite some time. I kind of honestly forgot about him. Yeah, it's been 8 games since he had any points. And the ice time has been relatively consistent. Last 5 games averaging almost 18 minutes there, but not top power play. I don't think that's really in the cards anymore. 209 shots per 60, 210 individual expected goals for per 60, 326 on ice expected goals for per 60 over the last 5. 18 goal, 41 point pace. That honestly feels about right for Will Cooley in this current iteration of the team and of how he's playing. I don't think I would expect much different rest of season. It's a cold stretch. I don't think it's likely to continue for much longer, but I do think that 40-point Will Cooley is what we should expect moving forward. Rickard Rakell, 2 goals, 4 points in his last 5, over 21 minutes, average time on ice, 22nd shots per 60, 31st individual expected goals for per 60, 81st on ice expected goals for per 60. It's a 20-goal, 58-point pace for Rakell in the 24 games that he has played. As long as he's with Crosby, you got to absolutely love Rickard Rakell. He's going to get tons of shots, tons of minutes. Things are going to be great for Rakell. The problem is that at some point here, we could be looking at a scenario in which the Penguins do decide that the best thing is for the team to move on from Rickard Rakell, to dangle him at the trade deadline here and see what they can get back for him. That would be pretty unsurprising for a lot of people, including myself, if that were to happen. And so, you're just gonna have that looming over you, I guess, for the rest of the season with Rickard Rakell. So I guess my confidence with the player rest of season really just has to depend on my confidence that he's going to stay in Pittsburgh rest of season. My personal confidence in that is not high. I think someone is pretty likely to step up with a nice sweetheart package for him. And then it'll be up to the Penguins to try to say no when they're staring down the barrel of all of their top guys being 35 plus. And I just doubt that they'll be able to at that point. So yeah, a little gun shy of Rakell still, but would love to have him on my roster right now. If you're scrapping for the playoffs, you probably don't care. You want a guy like this, and maybe you can even buy him low from a team like a top contending team who is worried about that exact scenario playing out, and you don't care about that. You're just trying to get some wins right now. Maybe that's worth investigating. Maybe worth waiting a little bit just to see how things play out before you try to do something. I could see it both ways there. I like the player in the current scenario, but in a different scenario, that would be pretty scary. There's a pretty good chance he wouldn't be line 1 or power play 1 on a new team. Elias Pettersson, we talked about. He does have a goal in this game here today against the Canadiens. I think it was just the goal in the first, nothing else. Prior to today's game, 2 goals, 3 points in the last 5, over 18.5 minutes average time on ice. 4th, as I mentioned, in on ice expected goals for per 60 over those 5 games. 25 goal, 59-point pace in the 36 games he's played on the season. Honestly, I don't know how much better than that we can realistically expect it to be. I think he can be a 65-point player, but I wouldn't push him to 70 based on everything that we're seeing out of Vancouver this year. Their likelihood to continue to sell, Kiefer Sherwood rumored to be on the block, all these things. It just wouldn't be surprising if, we get 60 to 65-point Pettersson rest of season. It may still be worthwhile. He is a good peripheral player, offers you a lot in that scenario, so might still be well worth your trouble, but yeah, definitely tempering expectations for Pettersson in this current version of the Canucks. Sorry, I had to get out a cough. I'm feeling much better, but still fighting a cough. I took a toll on the lungs, all the coughing I've been doing over the last 3 weeks. All right, Patrick Kane, 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points in his last 5 games. Just over 15.5 minutes average time on ice, and not on the top power play is the really tough part to swallow for Patrick Kane rosterers. James Van Riemsdyk taking that spot from him as of late, and that power play unit did score again tonight, so it's unlikely to change again moving forward. They are end of the second there. Detroit up 3-0 on Carolina. And yeah, Van Riemsdyk scored on the power play. So yeah, unlikely that that's going to change. For what it's worth, Kane did pick up an assist here at even strength, and his even strength line with the Brinket has scored both of the even strength goals for the Red Wings so far. So still generating stuff. 49th shots per 60, 184 individual expected goals for per 60, 216 in on ice expected goals for per 60. That's not ideal. 71 point pace on the season. I still think Kane is a pretty terrific player, and yeah, if you ask me Pettersson versus Kane rest of season points, I would take Kane every time. So I'm still in on the player. I just find it really hard to believe that James Van Riemsdyk is going to keep Patrick Kane off the top power play in Detroit for much longer than a week or two. Nazem Kadri here, no points in his last 5. Been a really tough run for him. His name is out there in trade talks a lot as well. Over 20 and a half minutes average time on ice, 221 shots per 60, 225 individual expected goals for per 60, 266 on ice expected goals for per 60. This is a guy who's typically known for the shot production being very high. His conversion is super low on the season. It really feels like this is a player who's just feeling the weight of all those rumors and not knowing where he's going to, be sent off to at any moment. That's what it feels like to me at the moment. I still believe in Kadri. I have Kadri in one place and I haven't dropped him yet. I probably honestly should in that spot because it is a bit of a shallower league, not my most competitive league, and even if he's picked up, he might get dropped again. So, yeah, I don't think you have to hang on to Kadri even in 12-team leagues at this point, but I think there's actually a pretty good chance that he goes to a team that's kind of missing a 2C. Team, I can even think of a team like Montreal, who they might really like a Kadri between Demidov and Slavkovsky, let Kapanen fit into a more natural 3C role. That could work. So yeah, there's just a lot of scenarios I can instantly envision where Kadri is immediately doing a lot better and back more towards that 70-point pace that we expect from him with a lot more shots again. Yeah, it depends how patient you can be, I guess. I don't see it likely to change significantly for the better in the next week or two unless there's a trade. All right, we got 3 more left on the list, but I want to get back to the comments before I close it out there. Let me try to get back up here and see where we go. I think this is where we start. Pecora, would you take Wool or Hill rest of season in a Cats league? Wins, save percentage. Worried about Wool's volume when Stolarz comes back. Seems like Hill will be the number one. I would agree. I would take Hill there for sure. Geeky tied for last in goals for in the calendar year 2026. Yeah, it's been a rough go for him in 2026 for sure. What are your thoughts on Wedgwood versus Blackwood rest of season? I think they're probably going to split it pretty evenly, but I do think that Blackwood is the guy they want to be the starter there long term. He's got the bigger contract, etc. Whether or not that really means anything for fantasy purposes for the amount of starts that Blackwood gets, I'm not sure. So that's something definitely to just keep an eye on. I think that if I have to pick between them, I'd pick Blackwood every time. But it's also a pretty good chance that both are just in a 50-50 split rest of the time. Sorry, Mr. Goche talk earlier. Would you buy low on him? Great playoff schedule for me, and wingers like him are sort of a commodity in my league with faceoff wins. Yeah, I think you can buy low on Goche for sure. I think it will get better for him. It depends how low, for sure, right? So, yeah. Shots on goal are weighted heavy to balance everyone with C's. I understand. Yeah, that definitely makes Goche a very interesting commodity if shots on goal are weighted heavily in your league. Dylan Strome, please. We can definitely throw on Dylan Strome here. I actually realized 2 of the other players we've already talked about, so we've only got 1 left after Dylan Strome. 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 points in his last 5. 19 minutes average time on ice, 235 shots per 60, 207 individual expected goals for per 60. That's not really his game. 109th in on ice expected goals for per 60. He's on a 19-goal, 63-point pace. IPP is really low here at 54%. That's the thing that I think can climb back and he can get back to a 70-point pace. But also I think the Capitals are just spreading out the love. They're getting a lot of work out of, McMichael, out of Sordif, out of Leonard. And so they don't need Strome to play as much. Pierre-Luc Dubois is going to come back, and then they will need him potentially even less. And so, yeah, I think you might be looking at more like this 20 goal, 65 point Dylan Strome than, this 75 plus point player that I probably projected him for at the beginning of the season. Now I'm going to have to go back and look at what I had Dylan Strome for at the beginning of the season. I think it was in that range. Let's see if I'm remembering correctly. Where's Washington at? Dylan Strome, I had for 27 goals, 73 points. So not too far off from what I was saying. I think he can be better. I think the IPP is definitely low here. Even the shooting percentage is kind of low here for what he's done historically. So I think it can be better for Dylan Strome, but I don't think it's likely to get back to where I had him projected at the beginning of the season as a 73-point player. Right. The Trevster. Hey, Nate, just getting in here, wondering if you've heard / talked about points, injury, and replacements yet. I had not seen anything about a point injury. Is that in... Braden Point will not return to tonight's game. Point scores on the power play, was hurt on the play. Right knee was twisted underneath. Threw off his gloves and grabbed his knee. That's not great at all. Yeah, that's going to be tough. Like, Cirelli obviously is probably going to take over centering duties on the top power play in that scenario. Trying to think if there's anybody else that I really think could benefit strongly from Point being out. I guess they could use some more Nick Paul, maybe. I'm still probably wouldn't be into that for fantasy purposes. It looks like they put Hagel up on the top power play the next time out in place of Point. So maybe Hagel gets some more work there. Who's taking the face-off in that scenario, though? I'd be surprised if Cirelli doesn't work in there somehow. Yeah, maybe a bump for Cirelli, but overall it's probably a downgrade for just about everybody if Point's out of the lineup. That's definitely a great player. It just happened. ACL looked kind of bad. I haven't seen it, so I'm not gonna speculate too much. But Point's injury did not look good. Don't like to hear that. Let's send in good thoughts for Braden Point, that's for sure. Especially, not just because I have him in the cupful. Monahan was one of Bonus's dogs, eh? Monahan was with Bonus? Oh yeah, in Winnipeg that time he was, wasn't he? That could be a scenario. I mean, Monahan is pretty clearly playing through something this year, and it doesn't seem like it's really cleared up. So I don't know that that's gonna happen this year. Well, if Monahan is still dealing with something, so yeah, that's something to keep in mind. I see this comment for Darlene. We already talked about Darlene on this show and the flagship show that came out earlier today, so you can go back and you can definitely catch that one there. Hi, I drafted Dostal and Allmark and held, have Vladar and Jari as well, but I feel like I've let a lot of goalies slip through, like Wedgwood, Knight, Vamelka, Greaves, Gibson. How do you spot talent? Basically, I don't. I have talked about this before. You can go back to some of my Zero G episodes I've done, but basically in season, I just have a basic heuristic that I use for myself. If I'm looking to pick up a goaltender for whatever reason, I get an injury or I feel like, it's a week where I can stream goaltenders more efficiently than I can stream position players, etc. If for whatever reason I'm looking at picking up a goaltender, then I basically narrow the list down to goaltenders who I think will play to get 2 starts for me that week. And from that list, I am looking mostly at the team situation, who they're playing that week, how I think those games are going to go, the games that I think that this goalie is going to get starts in. It's a pretty big difference if you're projected to start against Colorado or if you're projected to start against Winnipeg the next day, right? Those are 2 pretty different scenarios in terms of the expected goals against, right? So do take that into account when I'm picking up a goaltender. And then after that, I'm kind of letting that week play out. I'm seeing how that goaltender performs, and I am recycling and repeating the next week, basically. I'm just trying to catch lightning in a bottle, and when I've got it, I don't let it go. And if I don't got it, then I let it go and I move on to the next one. And it's really that simple for me. I just don't stay beholden to any goaltender if they're not performing, and I go on to the next one and find it. Um, so yeah, I really don't look at it from a lens of, oh, I let those players slip through my fingers. I didn't go out and get those players. I just look at what I'm trying to do to win my week. And when that includes a plan for goaltenders, then I'm using that heuristic to help me make those decisions. And if I feel like I've caught something, I've caught that lightning in a bottle with a goaltender who has like a really good week. Maybe he gets a shutout or has a shutout in a 1 goal against game, and all of a sudden it's looking like he might actually take over a bit more of the net share, and things can trend up pretty quickly from there. Then that's great. Oftentimes you'll find guys like this. That's how I got Vladar in a bunch of spots. Um, that's how I got, who's the other one I was just thinking? Oh yeah, John Gibson. That's how I got John Gibson in a bunch of spots. Yeah, I think it's really that simple, and I don't think you have to feel bad about players you miss. We all miss on players by definition. We can't have all the players that break out in any given year at any position. So I wouldn't beat yourself up too much about it. I would just focus on what's making you win each and every week of the season. Roster construction question regarding fantasy hockey playoffs and strategy. I'm in a 10-man head-to-head with no bye week. I'm 12-2. When should I start building my team for playoffs? At 12-2, yeah, I think you're in a spot where you can definitely start doing it. Especially if you're feeling confident about the skill level of the league. Sometimes you're 12-2, but you're like, I've actually gotten pretty lucky to be at 12-2. So if that's how you're feeling, then maybe you need a couple more wins banked before you really start to feel like you can go all in on playoff construction. But yeah, I would say you're at 12-2. You're feeling pretty assured of yourself there. I think that's a fine point. Any goalie buy lows other than Dostal you're looking at right now, or you just ignore goalie trades just as much as draft picks? Um, yeah, I basically have never traded for a goaltender. I've traded them away when they're doing really well and netted some rewards that way for sure. But yeah, it's not a spot where I am, trying to go out and get a goaltender in most cases. I am pretty exclusively, at least in the leagues that I like to play in. Every league is different. If you're in a 22 team league where every goaltender and every backup is rostered, that's obviously a different scenario. But if you're talking about just a more standard, 12 team head to head cats or head to head points league, then that's obviously a very different scenario as well. So if you're in that more typical boat, then I am really only looking to fill the goalie position through the waiver wire throughout the course of the year. And it hasn't led me wrong yet. I've got a long history of doing pretty well in my leagues doing that. So I haven't found a reason to change from that strategy. Is Duchesne a drop in 14 teamers? I think he can be. Maybe like Dallas doesn't have a bad schedule this week, so maybe try to squeeze a couple more games. I think they go Monday, Tuesday, Thursday here, so depends if you're getting him in for those games, or also obviously depends on who else might be out there in your league for you to pick up. If somebody else is out there that's obviously doing a lot better right now, in a better position to succeed, then I would be fine to make the drop, but I still think Duchesne's got it. I just think he's in a bad position to put up points for fantasy right now. What's your philosophy on players from the same team? I have 3 Canes, Ghost Spare, Jarvis, and Svetch. From the Wild, Kaprizov, Hughes, and Boldy, and Vegas, Theodore, Marner, Stone. All good players, but schedule stuff is worrying. Yeah, at that point, you are really kind of tying yourself to the success of those 3 teams. I don't love the imbalance of that. I would definitely at this point in the season, if you're sitting pretty hot for playoffs, if you're doing pretty well there, I would start to look at how those playoff schedules line up and how they overlap and if it works together. If it so happened that in week 22 or whatever that the Canes, Wild, and Golden Knights all have like 2 games in one of those weeks, then I'd be very, very worried about that scenario. But if they all have great schedules, then you're probably okay, right? So it's all a bit relative in that sense. 3 is probably the maximum I want, and having 3 from 3 different teams is a lot. So yeah, you've definitely introduced a huge amount of volatility that can go really good or that can go really bad, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just volatility. It can go both ways. Are we out on Jackson Blake for now? Yeah, for now. Young player, goes hot and cold at times. I think his underlyings, actually, they might have. Oh, that's Blake Coleman, not Jackson Blake. Jackson Blake, yeah, they've ticked back up recently. The underlyings have, so I still think he's a good player. It's just a Rod Brindamore effect, right? Power play 2, line 2, 15 minutes a night. It's going to be hard for him to produce huge numbers in that scenario. So, still a good player. 25th individual expected goals for per 60, 43rd on ice expected goals for per 60 over the last 5 games. Still good stuff there. I just don't know that we're going to, get a massive Jackson Blake spike. He did score here in the third period. Power play goal assisted by Nikishin and Taylor Hall. So they did get on the board here in this game for what it's worth. Thanks from Astro GMs. Ready for clearance said, yeah, he just scored. All right, last player to talk about, and then I'm getting out of here. Jordan Kyrou. Kyrou has just 1 assist in his last 5 games. Also a player that Blake and I talked about on the flagship show. So definitely go back and get our chat in there. 15.5 minutes average time on ice, 6th in individual expected goals for per 60, 19th in on ice expected goals for per 60 over the last 5 games. This is still a really, really talented player who can drive a ton of offense at any time. His shooting percentage 9.1%, on ice shooting percentage 9%, just really, really low compared to where he normally is. I don't think that lasts, but I do think it's probably a case where he's just having a lot of trouble showing up for work every day. Like Jim Montgomery has been public in kind of talking badly about him, and I don't think many people would necessarily respond well if their boss was publicly criticizing them to the national media about their play. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Kyrou has had this with multiple bench bosses, so maybe he's just kind of a dingus himself. That's entirely possible. But in terms of fantasy, I still think this is a guy who has a lot of potential to pop off rest of season if something changes, if him and Montgomery work it out between them, if Montgomery gets fired, if Kyrou gets moved at the trade deadline. There are a lot of scenarios where it works out pretty well, I think. For a guy like Jordan Kyrou, just because the skill level is so high. So I kind of want to just be generally in on players that I think have a high skill level. It's just, yeah, when will that occur? If you need to drop Kyrou in the meantime, you absolutely can. But, we could wake up tomorrow and he could be traded to a really exciting spot, and then everybody will be all over it. So if you can't afford to hang on to Kyrou for the time being, I might be interested in doing that just for that potential scenario over the next couple of weeks. All right, we made it to the end of the list. We made it to the end of the comments. I think that is going to be all that I've got for this episode. Hopefully it brought you some value, helped you get a little bit better at fantasy hockey today. All the advanced stats you heard today came from Natural Stat Trick and 18 Skaters. Many thanks to Matt Creamer for supplying the music for the podcast. That's it, folks. Much love.